Burnout for me at my lowest point was all the basic needs I didn't want to do. Like, I didn't want to get out of bed, I didn't want to eat. Showering is like a task.
I feel like every college student has in some way felt burnout.
For me personally, I think COVID was like the sole reason I thought about dropping out.
Burnout has reached a completely new level for people as stressors from the COVID-19 pandemic changed everyone's lives. The American Psychological Association states that as the world heads into the third year of the pandemic, these stressors have become persistent and indefinite, heightening everyone's risk of burnout.
You know, I think burnout, I like the description because, you know, I always liken it back to a candle, right? Candle has so much wick and it'll burn and burn and burn until it can't. And then it's just done, right? There's nothing left for that candle to give. And that's what burnout is, right? It's when you've worked at something sometimes for so long, or there's been so much stressors and adversity that you just can't.
Students struggling with burnout at Simpson College isn't an uncommon experience. For students such as Morgan Rosenbeck, Chase Henry, and Mallory Burkhart, burnout comes from an overflowing schedule with lingering stress from the COVID-19 pandemic.
I feel like a big part of it is trying to manage time between schoolwork and friends. You're meeting a lot of new people, you have the more freedom in college. I felt like I couldn't get any work done. Like, the amount I had was too overwhelming to start, and then once I did start, I felt like I just kept telling myself, like, you're doing this all wrong. Like, what's the point of even trying if you're just gonna fail?
I just kind of noticed a decline in my emotion and motivation.
But a lot of it is like, I wake up and I'm like, do I really need to go to class today? Like, what's happening there that like I need to be there? And so like I start skipping, and then I just kind of start sleeping more, and like I don't really leave my apartment.
So it's just like getting myself to actually do that schoolwork. And I feel like for me, that kind of started with COVID. I think my schedule every single day was basically the exact same. And so since that one schedule was really busy, it just made me burn out. Doing that every single day just kept adding up and just kept getting worse.
I'd mentioned like COVID was kind of like a positive experience for me in the beginning. That was a unique time for me as someone who has just always been running, like super busy, super involved, not a lot of family time. That kind of forced my family anyways to, you know, be together more. Once we got back on campus, I was excited at first, but it's like almost immediately I just felt like kind of burnout, just like a different mood and different environment I've never felt before, just because like, yeah, we're back on campus, but in a way there was really no social interaction.
Shortly after winter break of sophomore year, my grandmother passed away, and that was super rough. And so I was just kind of reevaluating my life, trying to figure out who I was, and I like was not going to class. I had caught COVID at that point too, so it was about 3 weeks of I just lived at my parents' house, and it was familiar and comforting, and I was like, I could just do this.
The stress and anxiety Burkhart faced during this time caused her to think seriously about dropping out of college entirely.
And so I had like come back to campus, and I looked at my roommate, and I went down to the Picken first floor, printed out the paperwork, and just kind of sat on the floor of that dorm room and was ready to do it. And then my mom like wouldn't let me. She got me hooked back up with my therapist because I had kind of started avoiding that as well, because I knew the path I was going down, and I didn't, you know, want to recognize it because I never do. And kind of worked through it, and I'm sitting here about to graduate.
Burnout is not something that can be specifically diagnosed, but it can be incorporated with feelings of stress, anxiety, depression, and struggles with school or work life.
We've definitely been being utilized with anxiety and stress being the most common reasons people note. So that, I think those are both two very characteristic signs of that burnout sort of factor, or if they aren't burnout when they come in, can lead to that if they go unaddressed.
Academic performance can start to slip, or maybe you start to like get tired of hanging out with friends, or you're just like, it kind of can go over to other things besides like, I don't want to write this 12-page paper. It might become, I don't really want to do anything.
I mean, when I've come close, I think it's repetitive stuff.
We live in sort of turbulent times, and it's easy to feel, I think, stressed out.
oftentimes just too much, and people are thinking they've got to do everything at once, and they put too much pressure on themselves. Sometimes they don't feel like they're being supported, and so on.
Professors like Mark Green explain the signs he notices that a student in his class may be battling burnout.
As far as my students go, if a student isn't coming to class, or if the student misses a lot of classes, is late to class, appears to be inattentive during class, they're having trouble focus, it makes me think that there's something else going on.
Students are not the only ones who may be experiencing burnout, as professors and other working professionals tend to feel the harsh effects as well.
People are just, I can't do it anymore.
I've certainly had times where I don't want to do any more work. And I've also had times when I don't really want to go teach a class after a long semester.
I know all of us here have felt it in various stages. Like last year, I was the only person. I was absolutely feeling burnt out by the end of the year.
In the last year, of the students who voluntarily went to counseling services, 83% of students attend Simpson's counseling for anxiety, 73% for stress, 52% for depression, 31% for academic performance, and 28% for perfectionism, which can all be associated with feelings of burnout. Simpson College's counseling services have been working on plans to combat student burnout.
I have this conversation quite a bit between staff and faculty about how to manage the new kind of students that we got coming in, right? Because they're not learning the same way that students did previously. And part of that is hey, we went through this and we were stressed out and we're still feeling fried, and we hypothetically, right, have our brains that are fully developed. College students don't, right? That's a part of coming in here. And so trying to learn how to, okay, if we're burnt out and feeling crispy, how are these students feeling when they don't have the same emotional and brain capacities that we do?
It's time to see if these issues of burnout go farther than Simpson's campus. I met with Granville University's Director of Counseling, Heather Thomas, to get an idea of the levels of burnout from a different school's perspective.
Grandview students are probably aligned with what the national trends show with the reasons for seeking campus counseling, which is really depression, generalized anxiety are really the top two. But like the rest of the country, we're definitely seeing an increase of social anxiety is most definitely coming up. And I would say students definitely have said those exact words. They have said burnout, like I am burnt out, I'm ready to be done. And I think it looks different for different folks. I think those who maybe be juniors or seniors are really have a burnout that is really I am just tired of this and ready to be done. I think freshmen and sophomores seem to be more just adjusting still to this world and what college even looks like. In this last week and a half, I've had about 3 or 4 who I've already seen who are saying that. So I don't know that I've had anybody come in because of burnout only, but I think a lot of the symptoms of anxiety are present, and that's what's driving them in.
Although burnout can feel draining, overwhelming, and never-ending, there are different ways to cope.
I think if people can find a community we got the Simpson community, but find your people, your community here, and support each other, then that can be very beneficial. And sometimes I'll take the first step, and if I feel like somebody's struggling, I'll say, why don't you come in? Let's check in at my office, kind of thing.
One, I will say talk about it, right? Because the more we keep things silent and we just think, oh, I'm the only one feeling this way, so I just have to power through, the more power it ends up having over us. So if we can just mention it, chances are, one, you're going to find somebody else who's like, oh my gosh, me too, thank you for saying that.
The problem, I think, arises just when people think, right, they're sort of alone, alienated in the struggle.
It is not a rare occurrence. You're not alone if you're feeling that. It does pass, right? Part of it is just the environment that college breeds is just this intense focus on your studies, and then you get into your field and you figure out how to use it in a way that's helpful.
One of the biggest things that's always helpful is to remember your why. Why are you doing this? Why are you in college? What's the point? Right? So when you can connect to that and connect to the reason for it, and hopefully you're on the trajectory of really connecting to a passion. Hopefully you're really loving what your major is and that you're excited for your future. So connecting to your why is really helpful.
I hope that every student here at the college knows that faculty and staff, we are here to help. We are here to support you. And this is the coaching staff, student development, the people in admissions. Even if you only did one productive thing that day, that's first step. And tomorrow, do 2 productive things. And before you know it, you've done 3 productive things by lunchtime, and you've got some momentum going.
There are tips and tricks students have come up with to help with their feelings of stress and to deal with the heavy workload.
I would say to just, like I said, evaluate your schedule first, and then if there's nothing you can't take out or anything, or even with schoolwork, obviously you can't get rid of that, definitely ask for help, like reach out to people. I've reached out to professors a lot more this semester than I ever did last, which has been very helpful. It's less stressful. I know that I'm doing my assignments correctly.
So I started to like read more and like budget my time out. So like if I got my homework done, I could read. It was like a reward system again. And I think having that like hobby has really been helpful.
Overall, one common adjustment that has been a theme to combat these feelings is to talk about it and remember that you are not alone in this fight against burnout.